Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for joining me this week. So, in this week's video, I wanted to do something different and do more of a podcast style video. And the reason why I decided to do that was because this topic is really important and I want to focus more on what I'm actually saying versus everyone just watching me talk about this topic. So, this week I wanted to discuss something that is really important, and that is anxiety. Now, this is a topic I'm really passionate about because I think it is something a lot of people struggle with. Either you yourself have had anxiety or you know someone who has suffered from it. And my goal is to help you really understand where your anxieties come from so you can heal them yourself because you can. This topic's really important to me because when I was growing up, I never heard about anxiety. You didn't have anxiety when you were a child or a teenager, and it just wasn't something that either was talked about or maybe it was something that we just didn't have at a very young age. And now this topic anxiety is talked about everywhere, and it's starting in children at a very young age. And with the world that we live in nowadays and social media and bullying, it's understandable why children are getting anxiety at such a young age. And I myself actually don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that the younger you are, if you can understand anxiety, learn how to handle it, it will serve you for the rest of your life. So it's almost like the younger you are to learn how to nip it in the butt right away. That way it doesn't become something, severe as an adult. And as these children are growing up, if they learn how do I deal with life? How do I deal with things that are out of my control? How do I deal with these thoughts that I'm thinking that are causing me to feel anxious? How do I have that mental toughness to get through these thoughts that are causing me to have anxiety? So the younger you are, if you're able to understand this information and really get a lot of good tools that'll help you throughout your whole life, I think that that's a great thing. The biggest thing I want you to take away from this is to understand none of what I'm telling you is going to be a quick fix. I'm not going to prescribe a pill for you to take to get rid of your anxiety because I want you to be able to get rid of your anxiety on your own, and you can. It just takes self-awareness, it takes practice, and I know you can all do it. Now, I want to give you a couple of things to start thinking about and practicing in your own life so you can start to feel better and not only heal some of your anxieties, but also help you to increase your self-confidence, your self-esteem, and your self-worth. This is not just about anxiety. This is about bringing more self-love into your life so you can begin living a more happier and peaceful life. So let's get into the basics. What is anxiety? The definition of anxiety is a feeling of worry or nervousness or unease, typically about an event or something with an uncertain outcome. My definition of anxiety is it's your body's way of telling you something that your mind cannot understand. Now, what I mean is you're having so many thoughts at one time that are running wild with no one controlling them. And since you can't get a real grasp on them, they start snowballing. And your body starts displaying certain behaviors like, upset stomach or muscle tension or sweating, trouble sleeping. We can start having insomnia. You can't breathe. You're getting dry mouth. You're feeling dizzy, maybe even shaky. And the list goes on and on. And I'm sure we've all experienced some of these symptoms at one point or another if you have ever had anxiety. But what I would like you to do is actually change your view on anxiety from being a bad thing or a scary thing to being a good thing. Now, I know that sounds a little crazy since we're trying to get rid of our anxieties, but let me explain because believe me, this will actually make sense. Now, if you change your view on anxiety and actually when these symptoms come up, really embrace them, you will see that anxiety is literally just your body's way of telling you that you just had a thought or numerous thoughts that are not true. So when you start to get anxious and you're starting to have these symptoms are your, I like to say your true self or your soul, your intuition, whatever it is that you want to call it, but it's your essence essentially. It's that part of you that we all have within us that's giving you these symptoms to tell you that, hey, what you're thinking right now and what you're telling yourself is negative, it's unsupportive, it's quite frankly, it's just wrong. It's not even true. So it's your soul's way of communicating with you. And it's the same thing when we've all been there, when our intuition is telling us that something's wrong. And we've all been in situations or we've met people where our intuition is speaking loud and clear and maybe we don't listen to it. And this is the same thing. This is your intuition's way. This is your soul's way of telling you, hey, you're starting to think things that aren't true. And I'm going to give you these symptoms so you can be aware of what you're actually thinking and how what you're actually thinking is causing you to have this anxiety. These fear-based negative thoughts are causing you to feel nervous about something that's actually not even happening in this moment. And that is huge to understand. And it's so important in terms of really healing from anxiety. The things that you're thinking that are causing you to have anxiety, that are causing you to feel nervous, are not happening to you in this moment. So, what happens is when you've been having numerous thoughts that are scary or negative or unsupportive, and now what's happening is your body's reacting to those thoughts by giving you these symptoms. Your body will always display a reaction to what you're thinking. So if you have a fearful thought or a scary thought that just really, worries you, then your body's going to react. Just like if you have a happy thought or a positive thought, your body reacts. It responds differently. So now let's get into what actually causes anxiety. So there are so many reasons for anxiety, but there's never just one reason for someone to get anxious. Usually it's a combination of a few things. Some might be highly sensitive and, maybe their nervous systems are already wired to be a little on edge. Some people are worriers and they worry about a lot of different things at one time, and eventually that causes them anxiety. And worrying is a learned behavior. So, and that's really, really important to understand because we're not born worrying. When we're children, we're not worrying as, an infant or a baby. So worrying is a learned behavior. Some people have experienced, a natural disaster or really bad trauma, and now they're wired to feel anxious in certain situations. Another factor that's really important to understand is genetics. If your mother or your father were anxious, then it's actually been proven that those types of disorders are within our DNA and they're actually passed down to us. So if when your mother carried you, if she was anxious, if she was depressed, if she was a worrier, you felt that inside of her. And now you're wired to feel anxiety. You're wired for those types of things because number one, it's all you've ever felt, and it's all you're going to ever know as a young child because you're always around your parents. So that's really important to understand as well. But the easiest answer to what actually causes anxiety is you. It's your own thoughts that you're having that are causing you to feel anxious. And when you really get that, you can take responsibility for your anxiety. And when you take responsibility for something is when you can actually start making a change. It's when we don't take responsibility and we let our anxieties take over and run the show that they then turn into panic. And now we feel like we can't even get out of it. And that's the scariest thing. And if you've ever had a severe anxiety attack or a panic attack, you know that it's way harder to get yourself out of that hole than it is to just learn how to monitor your thoughts and catch those fear-based thoughts as they're happening. So let's get into our thoughts. Most of our thoughts come from our subconscious mind. Now, our subconscious mind was programmed in childhood. It holds all of our beliefs about ourselves and about the world. It holds all of our values, our habits, our emotions, and a bunch of other things. But for the sake of this, I'm going to be very general on our minds. Just know that all of your beliefs that you hold about yourself, your self confidence, your self worth, how you love yourself, how you treat yourself, how you speak to yourself, all are stored in your subconscious mind. So, since we use a majority of our subconscious mind every day, whatever beliefs you have about yourself, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, whatever those beliefs are, will determine pretty much every decision you make in life. It will determine the type of people you have as friends, it will determine the type of partner you attract, the career that you choose to have, whether or not you apply for the job you really want to, everything. Now, your conscious mind is where logic and reason are stored. So, if you have a thought which came from a belief that you're carrying around in your mind, in your subconscious mind, you have, as a wonderful human being, you actually have the power to consciously see that you are thinking that thought, and you can choose to either believe that thought or not believe that thought. So, you ultimately have the power to decide what you want to believe. And the reason why you're having anxiety is because you're having a fear-based thought come into your mind and you're choosing to believe it. Now, the next thing that I want to go over are the two parts of ourselves. We all have two parts of ourselves. We all have our ego part, and then we have our true self, our soul, our essence. Now, your ego self is easy to spot, but it's hard not to believe it sometimes because it's so convincing. You've probably heard it called, wounded self, your ego, monkey brain, it's false self. It's called a lot of different things, but I also like to refer to it as the bully in my mind. And like any bully, its purpose is to use manipulation, shame, guilt. It wants me to keep living in fear. It wants me to keep living in anger and hate and blame. And it just wants to bring me down. It doesn't want me to succeed. It doesn't want me to stand up for myself. It just wants me living in a fear-based reality. The reason why I like to refer to this as a bully is because, like most bullies, the more you listen to them, the more you actually begin to believe their lies, and you basically start to feel like crap after you leave them. And that's what your ego bully is doing to you. Now, I'm not going to even attempt to get into how or why the ego was formed because that could be a whole separate video in itself. But I just want you to get familiar with who's actually speaking to you at every moment of the day. So if you're getting a thought that's a happy thought, a positive thought, a content thought, a loving thought, that thought's coming from your true self. That thought's coming from your soul, the part of you that's connected to, God, the universe, source, whatever it is that you want to call it. That's your true self. Now, any thought that comes through that's negative, fear-based, unsupportive, is coming from your ego self. And you have to be able to recognize that, because when you can recognize it, you can not take on those fear-based thoughts and know where they're coming from and that they're not actually coming from you. They're just a thought that you're having. And that is so, so, so important to understand. And I wish everyone in the world understood this, because when you start to understand this, it helps you in so many areas of your life. It not only helps you to ease any anxiety or worry that you might have, but it'll also help you to increase your self-worth and your self-value and your self-confidence. This is just another tool that you're learning to help you to have more of this stuff in your life, to have a happier life, a more fulfilling life, a more peaceful life. Now, the question that I always had when I was really diving into this stuff and learning, where are my thoughts coming from? Why am I having these thoughts? And really, learning as much as I possibly can on this. The thing that really kind of shocked me was, if I have this true self, this, my soul, my essence, this part of myself that I've heard time and time again, because it's the part of me that can say, Steph, you can do it. Steph, you're amazing. Stephanie, you're doing a great job. All these amazing, wonderful things. And then there was always this other part of me that was always negative and, trying to put me down and saying bad and nasty things to myself. And at one point, I kind of realized that I have more of those thoughts than I actually have good thoughts. And I knew that was never the case because at one point or another, I was a child. And if you've ever been around a toddler, you will know that a child is so connected to themselves. They don't live in fear. They don't live in worry. They don't have these, negative thoughts about themselves that completely just destroy them. And I just wanted to know why all of a sudden, as we're growing up, we're becoming teenagers, as we're becoming adults, why do we tend to have these negative thoughts so much? And why are these positive thoughts not coming through? And there's many reasons, but I'm just going to go over one. One of the biggest things is that unfortunately, as we have become adults, we stop listening to our true self. We stop listening to our intuition. We stop honoring that part of ourselves, and we started listening to that negative voice. And a lot of the reasons why we started listening to that negative voice is probably because we had negative people around us, whether it's, our parents or society or friends, and we listened to what their fears were and they put their fears onto us and then we believed them. And so we've over time just started listening to that ego part of us and believing those negative things rather than learning how to dismiss that and focusing more on our intuition and listening to that part of ourself. Because your soul, your intuition, that's the part of you that's unconditional love. Like I said, it's the part of you that's connected to God and the universe or whatever you want to believe in, but it's the part of all of us that is connected to creation and therefore is unconditional love, and we all have it inside of us. It is the part of us that's always encouraging us and saying nice things, and it is the part of us that knows what's best for us and what situations are healthy for us to be in and what situations are not. So the most important thing that I want you to take away from this is to understand that any thought that you have that scares you, that's unsupportive, that's negative, that makes you fearful or worried about something, that thought is not coming from you. And we've all had those thoughts, the thoughts of you can't do this, you'll never find someone, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're always messing this up, you're not good at this. All of that negative stuff that's unsupportive and unloving, that is not coming from you. That is coming from your wounded self, false self, ego, monkey brain, whatever it is you want to call it. And when you can really accept that, you can recognize when that voice is coming through. A really great exercise that I give a lot of my clients to do is when you're starting to practice this, because really what you're practicing is being self-aware and being mindful of the thoughts that you're thinking. And that's a tricky thing because most of us live on autopilot. We're not really aware of the thoughts that we're thinking on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. And if you were aware of every thought you were thinking, I think you would be extremely, extremely enlightened. But, most of us aren't that enlightened. And so we have to really practice mindfulness. We have to practice, monitoring our thoughts. And the easiest way to start doing that is to put a reminder on your phone. Put a reminder a couple of times throughout the day that says check in. And when the reminder comes in, check in on how you're feeling in that moment. So if at any point throughout the day you're feeling, crappy, down, negative, depressed, lonely, anxious, worried, sad, whatever it is that you're feeling, ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling stressed? Why am I feeling worried? Sometimes the answer might come right away. and other times it might not. And you're going to have to really dig and dig. So this is a really big question is, how do we challenge our thoughts? I made a video recently about how to change how to increase your self-confidence by changing your thoughts. And so many people ask me this question, how do I just change my thoughts? And it's not something that you can just, I can't say, okay, just do this and you'll be able to change every single thought. You have to practice self-love. You have to practice self-awareness. You have to be able to practice how to monitor your thoughts, because all of these things take time and all of these things are practices, but you can do it. You just have to be so determined to beat anxiety, to fight these fear-based thoughts. And it actually gets easier when you realize that these are not your thoughts. These thoughts are not actually true. That was huge for me when I realized that these fear-based thoughts were not something that was happening in this moment. And then to almost get anxious and nervous about something that could happen seemed ridiculous to me. And I was able to start kind of fighting the bully a lot faster and easier when I realized that, because I realized my ego was just trying to keep me feeling stuck. It was trying to keep me to, live in fear, and I just wasn't tolerating it anymore. So it wasn't even a matter of, replacing necessarily a negative thought with a positive one. I just wasn't believing the negative thought to begin with. And that was absolutely a huge life changer for me. And I really hope it's a life changer for you too. Now, one of the things that I talk about in my videos, and I'm definitely going to start making a lot of videos on it, is how to self-parent yourself. Self-parenting, self-love, really they're one and the same. Self-parenting is all about how you talk to yourself, how you coach yourself, how you motivate yourself, encourage yourself. So for me, self-parenting is very, very similar to self-love in that it is all about how you essentially take care of yourself in every way possible. Now, if you already have children, this next part might be a little easy to understand because you obviously, love your children unconditionally. But if you don't have children, then I want you to think about someone that you love dearly and how you treat them, and how I want you to think about, how you would speak to them and how you would encourage them and how you would support them. So this is how you should always be treating yourself. How you speak to your children when you're loving them, encouraging them, supporting them, when they're scared, when they're having a fear-based thought. How do we respond to our children? And most likely, not even just our children, just anyone that we really, really love. Think of a best friend that you have. When that friend comes to you and they're feeling down and they're feeling low, how do you pick them up? What are the things that you say to them in order to help lift them? And same thing with your children. You're parenting that child. You're trying to show them who they really are because they're forgetting. They don't know in that moment who they are. They lost that sense of themselves. And it's the same thing with anyone that we love. We always do that for other people, and we have to learn how to do it for ourselves. So once you've identified the thought or thoughts that are making you feel anxious, you have to immediately go into parent mode or mommy mode or daddy mode or best friend mode or whatever it is that you want to call it. And you need to be the parent in your own mind. This is where you begin to connect to your true self. This is the part where you connect to, God, the universe, your soul, whatever it is that you believe is the source of unconditional love, whatever it is that you believe in, the part of you that is unconditional love that all of us have within us, and you begin parenting yourself from that place. So like I said, if you're a parent and you have a child that came to you and said, I just had a thought that I'm ugly, or if a best friend came to you and said, I'm ugly and no one will like me at this party tonight, how would you, as a loving parent or a loving friend, respond to that person? You would immediately say something like, That is 100% not true. You are absolutely gorgeous and perfect the way you are. You are an amazing human being, and everyone is going to love you. You would reinforce all the things that you see in this person that they're not seeing themselves. So when you start to really love yourself, when you have those fearful, worry, unloving thoughts, you will right away be able to catch that thought and then replace it with the truth. You'll be able to catch it right away because you'll notice, or you'll be aware that, wait a minute, I'm having a negative thought right now. And okay, I know that thought actually isn't coming from me. I know it's coming from my ego. And this is my chance to practice how to parent myself. And by parenting myself, I'm actually giving myself self-love. And by giving myself self-love, I'm going to increase my confidence, I'm going to ease my anxiety, and I'm going to feel better about myself. So since we're being aware of our thoughts and we're starting to challenge those thoughts, it'll start becoming easier and easier the more that this happens. I absolutely promise you. And the last thing that will help your anxiety is to stay in the moment. Try as hard as you can to always be connected to how you're feeling, because you know when you're starting to have a negative thought, because you start feeling like crap. And the minute you start feeling worried, anxious, stressed, crappy, down, low self-confidence, you just told yourself a thought that is unsupportive, not true, and it didn't come from you. So now you can tackle that thought right away and nip it in the butt the minute it happens and start practicing being your own parent, being your own friend. And there are days where it is going to be the easiest thing in the world to do. And then there are days where that ego is going to be so convincing and it's going to want to take you down. And that's okay. You're going to have those days for a while until you're able to keep practicing this, to keep listening to that intuition, that soul, that part of you, your true self. The more you keep listening to that part of you and enforcing those positive, motivating, supportive thoughts, the quieter that ego will become. It'll never go away fully, so don't expect that, but the quieter it will become, because it's not the part of you that you're focusing all of your attention on. We've all heard that phrase, wherever your thoughts go, the energy flows, or I don't even know exactly how it goes, but you get my drift. So the more you start focusing on that good part of yourself, that part of you that's actually you, that's actually your soul, your essence, that your true self, and not focusing on that ego part of you, the easier this will become and the more your anxieties will subside. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little different than I typically do things, but I hope you got as much good information as you were expecting or hoping to get out of it. Definitely listen to this over and over again. This is something that you have to learn, you have to practice. And I know for me, when I was going through this and learning how to ease my anxieties and learning about where my thoughts came from, it was so important to always be feeding my mind. And it's something that I still do to this day. We never stop growing. We never stop expanding. Self-development is not something that you just reach the finish line and then we're done. We're always learning and we can always learn more information. So, listen to these videos over and over again. Really let this information sink in so you can use these tools in your day-to-day life. And don't forget to leave any comments or questions down below. I love hearing your feedback, and I will see you next time.